For this session, we will talk about your introduction to government accounting manual. So before we use your NGAS or no new government accounting system, that is in 2002. And just recently, we have now your government accounting manual, which is now used in accounting for your government transactions or the accounting for your government funds. So in your introduction to GAM, what we want to learn is, of course, your concept of GAAP. Does it apply to your GAM? After we talk about your concept of GAAP, we look into the sources or the source of GAAP for your government accounting. Third, we talk about your GAM itself or the basics of your GAM. We start now and look and talk about your GAAP. So generally accepted state accounting principles. So we place here state because we are accounting for the state or for the government. So let's first discuss the concept of accounting principle. So what is an accounting principle? So accounting principle are propositions, general law, or rule adopted which on the basis of reasons demonstrated usefulness and general acceptance as the best way of carrying out the function and achieving the objectives of financial accounting. So generally, our GAAP in your commercial businesses is known as your PFRS. And your PFRS can be further subdivided as your PFRS per se, your PAS, and then your interpretations. How about for the GAAP for government accounting? We call it your PPSAS, which is furthermore discussed in your GUM. So your PPSAS is known as your Philippine Public Sector Accounting Standards. So actually, your accounting standards here in your commercial are the same with your accounting standards for your public sector. But the difference only again lies as to the accounting of your government fund. Because in your commercial, generally, we account for your equity, which is within, again, your PFRS or PAS. However, here, we account for your government equity or your government fund, which is not within your different accounting standards. So it is promulgated by law itself. So generally, our generally accepted state accounting principles are provided by law. Now, what are the objectives of our GAAP? So the objectives of our GAAP, of course, is to guide the accountants. How does your GAAP guide your accountants? Because your standards, as you all know, provides for your different provisions as to identification of an item, how we measure item, how we present and disclose the item. Because normally your accounting standards provide for those. First, how to identify the item or when to account for the item. Measurement, meaning your initial and secondary measurement or subsequent measurement. Communication and presentation, how to present it, whether current or non-current, or do we need to disclose some items, etc. Next, objective of your GAAP, of course, is to assure proper reporting. That is because based on the accounting principles or based by these standards, we have now certain standards, of course, or certain postulates we need to follow in the reporting. So therefore, it assures proper reporting or uniform reporting on our financial statements. And lastly, it provides for audit framework. Why does it provide for audit framework? Because if we have already the FS, we compare that FS based on our accounting standards. What is our accounting standards here? PPSAS together with your government accounting manual. So we check based on that FS, if ever, it is in consonance with what the standard says. So let's say the standard says you account for it under fair value. However, the FS does not account for it in the fair value. Therefore, we can check that there is a departure on our standard. So that is, those are the objectives of our GAP. Now we look into the sources of your GAP. So, a part of the process of assigning financial resources to organizational units so that they can carry their plans and scheduling the use of these resources and the results to be achieved outlined in the plan, planning, and controlling. Actually, that is the definition of your budget. So, I was not able to change this. So, remove that. So, what are the sources of our generally accepted accounting principles for the government? So the first one, or the primary source, is the pronouncement of COA, because it is the COA who created our GAM and any provision of the law. Secondary sources are any pronouncement of the government agencies. If ever there are special items to be accounted for that government agency, the government agency could pronounce its accounting for those items. Now we look into the principles surrounding our generally accepted accounting principles. So the accounting principles on the government accounting requires that, of course, the government agency shall record all its financial transactions and operations according with your GAAP and in accordance, of course, with your pertinent laws and regulations. So the following are the principles that are followed generally. First, the accounts of the agency shall be kept in such detail and at the same time be adequate to furnish the information needed by fiscal or control agencies of the government. So again, this talks about your presentation, the completeness of the financial statement. Next, the highest standard of honesty, objectivity, and consistency shall be observed in the keeping of accounts to safeguard against inaccurate or misleading information. So this talks about some principles or underlying principles as to the preparation of the financial statements or the accounts of the government. Third, the government accounting system shall be on double entry basis with the general ledger in which all financial transactions shall be recorded. Subsidiary records shall be kept where necessary. You already know that one, that government accounting still uses double entry bookkeeping. Fourth, the chart of accounts has three-digit coding system and provides for responsibility accounting. Why? Because we trace based on the chart of accounts, you know, the number on the chart of accounts, the account number. So those account numbers, they have a coding scheme. And based on that coding scheme, you can already see who is responsible on that particular account or who is responsible in the usage of that particular fund. So that is the use of your chart of accounts. Soon we will talk about your chart of accounts for the government. Fifth, the chart of accounts categorize PS, MO, FE, and your other operating expenses charged to capital outlay. Okay, you already know the different RAW books. So these are the different RAW books. And we said we need to classify based on our allotment to which or how we will make use of that allotment to a particular obligation under your RAW. Furthermore, as a principle, we must also categorize our chart of accounts based on our RAW. Next, of course, your matching principle. Your matching principle, of course, requires to match the revenues with the expenses. But also, we also talked before about your modified accrual basis. So sometimes it's hard to use matching principle using cash basis of accounting. But again, under matching principle, we need to at least match revenues and expenses. Some examples are depreciation as to use, as to your cost of services, as you provide the services, etc. Another principle On financial statement, we have fairness of presentation, compliance, timeliness, and usefulness. So under the fairness of presentation, this refers as to the disclosure into your financial information. In short, all must be properly disclosed, all are presented, and whether or not the presentation uh, is bad or good as to the image of that government agency, you still need to present it. For compliance, this talks about the compliance of the financial statement with the primary sources, including the secondary sources of accounting principles. So that says that your financial statement must comply both to your law, your pronouncement of COA, and also to your pronouncement of the government agency itself. Timeliness, of course, talks about the promptness of the financial statement. We say if ever it is promptly given, it is more useful to decision making. As to usefulness, this is the use of the financial information provided by the financial statement as to the user who will now make the decision. Number eight, obligation accounting is modified. Allotments and obligations are no longer journalized, so we will use your registries. Remember, we have two books, right? So we have your ledgers or your normal books, such as your journals, and we have your registries. So that's why your obligation accounting here, we have no journalization because we place it in your registry, and we have your certain items such as your accounting for your cash, etc. We account it for your ledgers and your journals. And lastly, all lawful expenditures and obligation incurred during the year shall be taken up as accounts of that year. So this talks about, of course, your proper accounting period. So it must go with that proper period. So if ever you have that obligation on that period, you account for that obligation on that period. Okay? So we're done talking about your accounting principles and your sources. Let's now talk about your GAM. So your government accounting manual. So the government accounting manual is prescribed by COA. As we said, your COA is the main source or the primary source of your accounting principle. And COA, therefore, through that power, issued your GAM. So what is the basis of your GAM? Your GAM is based on Article 9-D, Section 2, Paragraph 2 of the 1987 Constitution of the Republic of the Philippines. So let's read that Article 9D. Article 9D, the Commission on Audit shall have exclusive authority, subject to the limitations in this article, to define the scope of its audit and examination, establish techniques and methods required therefor, and promulgate accounting and auditing rules and regulations, including those for the prevention and disallowance of irregular, unnecessary, excessive, extravagant, or unconscionable expenditures or uses of government funds and properties. So, based on this provision, the mandate of COA is divided into two. First, as to its audit function, and as to the accounting. As to audit, it provides for the scope of its audit and the methods as to audit. As to accounting, it provides for your accounting rules and regulations. And what is our accounting rules and regulations? We call it now as your GAM. Please take note, it is not already NGAS, but GAM, Government Accounting Manual. Okay. Sir, will there not be an issue within the audit and accounting objectives of your COA because they will now issue the accounting standards and then they will also audit? There is no issue as to that. Why? Because they will only issue accounting standards. They are not the ones who are accounting it actually. Okay? So standards only, they are not accounting it. Who are accounting it? The different government agency. After the accounting process, of course, you have the financial reports, which is now subject to audit. Only the postulates which makes the financial statements or which creates your accounting standards, but they are not really involved actually in the accounting of the government agency. Therefore, there is no problem as to the scope of work of your COA as to audit and accounting. Now, let's look into the coverage of GAM. So what is the coverage of GAM? GAM presents the basic accounting policies and principles in accordance with your PPSAS. So I told you already, PPSAS together with GAM. So this was adopted through COA Resolution number 2014. Therefore, your GAM was effective 2014, and your NGAS was effective 2002. So it took 12 years. It took 12 years before the government accounting system was changed to GAM. And when we talk about your coverage, we talk about who actually makes use, who uses the GAM. So the GAM is used by your national government agencies. Take note of this. Why? Because it means that it does not apply to your LGU. So remember, when we talk about government, we have certain instrumentalities within it. We have your national government, we have your local government, and we have also your different GOCCs. Take note, this GAM applies only to national government agencies. Please take note of that. It does not apply to LGU. Now, sir, how do we account for LGU? They are still using government funds. There is a separate accounting manual for your LGUs. That is separate. Now, after knowing who uses it, to what does your national government uses the GAM? So the GAM is used by the national government in the preparation of its general purpose financial statements. So when we talk general purpose financial statements, again, these are financial statements which caters to all needs of your users. Diba, there are two types of your financial statements generally. That is a special purpose financial statement and a general purpose financial statement. Special purpose only to specific persons or specific usage. General purpose, all. Okay? All meaning the common purposes. Okay? Next, the national government agency will use GAM in the reporting of budget, revenue, and expenditure in accordance with laws, rules, and regulations. Okay? Take note of that. So, the NGAS now, therefore, was changed to GAM, and the GAM is used by the national government agencies for what? For preparation of GPFS and for the reporting of budget, revenue, and expenditure. Objective of GAM. So the Government Accounting Manual has the following objective. First, of course, is to update the standards, policies, guidelines, and procedures. I told you it took 12 years before the previous government accounting manual or the government accounting system was changed to GAM. So to account for that changes as to financial measurement, then GAM was made. Further, there was a change or update into the coding structure and accounts. Take note the coding structure. What we did here is for the responsibility accounting. So as I told you earlier, based on the chart of accounts, the account number, you can see already who is responsible. So the whole accounts or chart of accounts was updated and the coding structure was also updated. Furthermore, there is an update as to the accounting books, the registries, records, forms, reports, and financial statements. So there is an update as to what books are used, the registries to be used, the records, and the forms, including the number of financial statements. basic government accounting and budget reporting principles. So this was already provided by your GAM. A while back, the principles are used in the framework of your government accounting standards. Now, these are principles entirely provided inside the GAM. So what are those principles? So each entity shall recognize and present its financial transactions and operations conformably to the following. First, generally accepted government accounting principles in accordance with PPSAS and pertinent laws and rules and regulations. We already know that because we should not depart to our standard. Next, accrual basis of accounting. You already know that. Budget basis for presentation of budget information in the financial statements in accordance with PPSAS 24. So here, we also present now a budget. The RCA prescribed by COA, double entry bookkeeping, you already know that. Financial statement based on accounting and budgetary records, you already know that. And fund cluster accounting, this is new. You already know that we account using funds. However, we now use fund clusters. So they are clustered as follows. First is your regular agency fund. Again, you know that we are already using fund accounting. Now, they are further clustered the following. First, we have your regular agency fund. Next, we have your FAP fund. What is your FAP fund again? When we talk about FAP, foreign assisted projects. Next, we have your special account fund. And this special account fund is for local grants. Next, we have again a special account fund for your foreign grants. Next, fund cluster, we have your internally generated funds. Next, we have your business related funds. And then lastly, your trust receipts. Okay, so those are your different fund clusters under your GAM. So the GAM now clustered different funds. GPFS, we said your GPFS talks about general purpose financial statements. And your general purpose financial statements is used or directed to the common needs of users. Common needs of users. So what is the objective of your general purpose financial statement? So there are two objectives. The first one, of course, is to provide information which is useful in decision making. The second one is the evaluation of decisions about allocation of resources. So unlike in your conceptual framework, your GPFS has only one objective, and that is to provide financial information useful for decision making. Under your GAM, we have two objectives. The first one, of course, is to provide financial information useful for decision making. And aside from that, it also provides for another objective, that is to evaluate decisions about allocation of resources. Sir, why does your GAM has now two objectives as compared to your conceptual framework? That is because, remember, we look into the stewardship of the government agency as to your government funds. That's why the financial statements must also provide for the financial information or the necessary information to evaluate the management stewardship or the government agency stewardship of the government funds. Specifically, the objectives of the general purpose of financial reporting in the public sector to provide information useful for decision making and to demonstrate accountability of the entity for the resources entrusted to them. Again, this is because of its stewardship of the government. Stewardship of the government. Now, what are the components of our GPFS? Our GPFS is composed of the following. First, we have your statement of financial position. Second, statement of financial performance. Third, we have your statement of changes in equity. Fourth, we have, of course, your statement of cash flows. Fifth, we have your notes to FS. And remember, we said that your GAM updated the number of financial statements. We have now the sixth one. We have your statement of comparison of budget and actual amounts. Okay? Statement of comparison of budget and actual amounts. Of course, this helps in the accountability of the entity or in the evaluation of the decisions of that entity in the allocation of the resources. So take note of the components of the GPFS. We have additional here, statement of comparison of budget and actual amounts. So that's it for your introduction to GAM. Again, what we talk about here in your introduction to GAM, we talk about your generally accepted state accounting principles, which is based on law or the provision of COA and other pronouncement of the agency itself. So what is now AREGA up therefore? We have your PPSAS, Philippine Public Sector Accounting Standards, together with your GAM. So GAM superseded NGAS. Remember that. NGAS was in 2002. Now GAM was effective 2014. And based on the GAM, we have the following GPFS. We have 6 items. Furthermore, take note, there is now a fund clustering. There is now a fund clustering. It is now clustered into 7 fund clusters. So from fund accounting, we have now fund clusters. That is your introduction to GAM.